clear Assad must go. Then they took out Gaddafi. That was a NATO operation in which the U.S., France, and the United States.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm going to have to stop you right there. It was a NATO operation. I know that NATO is a defensive alliance.
Yes.
So why would, defending the North Atlantic,
yes.
Why would NATO be killing leaders in Africa?
Because we needed to have the French, the British, and the Americans together to murder the leader of Libya and overthrow the government. That's why. And so
Did Libya get a lot better?
Libya has been in nonstop war since then. Again, profound destruction, massive loss of life, and ongoing civil war. And since I know many, many leaders around the world, I've asked them repeatedly why Gaddafi in 2011. And you know what they tell me? The leaders who are as close as can be to this, we don't know. Maybe Sarkozy hated him. Maybe Gaddafi funded Sarkozy's campaign. We don't know what this was really about. I've talked to recently an African president, very close to the scene, a very senior former African president, who said to me, Jeff, I can't give you the answer to that question. I've asked. He's been involved. I'll tell you another thing quite interesting, by the way, about these wars. In 2012, after the Syrian war broke out because of the United States. By the way, they say, no, it was the Syrian people, the Free Syrian Army, and so forth. Yes. Tell me about it. Who armed them? Who paid for them? Who trained them? Who gave them military bases? Of course, this is a CIA operation. Stop talking romantically about this domestic insurrection. This was a government operation. Okay. After it started, the UN tried to stop the war because failing to stop it, there would be massive death and destruction. And in fact, there have been hundreds of thousands of deaths after the fact. So a person I absolutely loved, Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the UN, went as the special envoy of the Secretary General to Syria. And he met all the parties. And Kofi Annan was a brilliant personality and a brilliant statesman. And he told me just before resigning in the spring of 2012, Jeff, there was a negotiated agreement. Peace could have come, but there was one party that said no, and that was the United States. And I asked, why did the United States block the peace agreement? He said, because the United States insisted that the only agreement it would sign would be one in which Assad would leave the first day. And Kofi Annan said to me, when I tried to say to the Americans that, well, there will be a process and under the agreement there will be elections and so forth, so there'll be a process. Said, no, we will only agree if it's the first day. So this is how American arrogance works. How you end up with 500,000 dead, how you end up with whatever this regime is in Syria right now. It took 14 years. It didn't come out of the blue. It was an American operation from the start. It then morphed in several ways, but this is a long-term story. And all of this is to say, and I mentioned not just Libya, but also Somalia, also Sudan, where the United States, it did an absolutely amazing thing. It supported an insurgency in what was then southern Sudan, to break apart Sudan because Sudan was an Islamist state supporting Palestine, blah, blah, blah. So we had to destroy Sudan. And they funded an insurgency for a long time. And then the United States, quote, brokered a peace to give independence to South Sudan. Okay, the American geniuses have created an instability so great that we not only have two Sudans, Sudan and South Sudan, we have civil wars in both Sudans. So this is ongoing, nonstop, massive deaths through another concoction of clean break, Bibi, the deep state. This is a disaster.
But it all goes back to the same root. And the last country on that list, as you said at the outset, is Iran.
That's it.
We were hearing this week that Iran is just weeks away from building a nuclear weapon. And so we need to take out the nuclear sites. We need to effect regime change in Iran. I feel like I've been hearing that Iran is weeks away from a nuclear weapon for at least 25 years.
Yes, at verbatim, at least a decade, and for longer in substance, yes.
Is Iran weeks away from building a nuclear weapon? Does Iran want a nuclear weapon? Will Iran get a nuclear weapon? What is the truth about Iran?
Iran does not want a nuclear weapon. Iran's neighbors, like the Saudis and others in the Gulf, do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Iran's major ally, Russia, does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon. But Iran does not want to be defeated militarily by Israel, does not want to be bombed to hell by Israel, and does not want to be sanctioned to death economically by the United States, which the U.S. has been doing now for endless years. So Iran has said for 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, unequivocally, we don't want a nuclear weapon. We want an agreement with you. We want you to lift sanctions, and we want a no nuclear system, and with all verifications and monitoring and safety as well. We want to have our nuclear power plants. We want our own military. We're not going to disarm in a region where Israel attacks every country in the region, and by the way, where we have other enemies as well. So we are not going to unilaterally disarm in our region, but we do not want a nuclear weapon. The truth is that has been known for a dozen years in detail at the highest levels. And
so what's the problem? That seems like a pretty good basis for an agreement.
The problem, there is no problem in reaching a sound agreement. And by the way, with the nuclear power plants, which are in dozens of countries, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has successfully monitored and set up absolutely rigorous monitoring, and Iran is open to that and has said so repeatedly, and has said it would work with the neighbors on the fuel supply chains and all the rest. There is no obstacle to this. And I think we're close to an agreement with Iran, in fact, thanks to President Trump, because Netanyahu says, no, we need to bomb the hell out of them. We need to defeat them like we defeated Saddam and Assad and Gaddafi. We need to take out this evil regime. That's his line.
So it's not about nukes, what you're saying. You're saying it's not about nukes, it's about regime change.
I think for sure. And that's been true all along.
Iran, so why not just say that? Why lie? Why does Fox News tell me every single, not that I have a TV, but I hear Fox News is telling everyone every day they're moments away from a nuclear. We cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Day after day after day. Why not just say no?
I think, by the way, that's true, and Iran would agree with that. Okay, yes, that's what we're saying.
So, but if you went on television right now, if you were back on your old perch on Morning Joe, and you said actually Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon, they would accuse you immediately of being an agent of Iran.
They might. Because maybe someone would tell them in their little earpiece to say that, because that's how it works.
But you're saying that's true. I mean, you're acting like that's like a non-controversial statement. No, Iran doesn't want to bomb. They've said they don't. They just don't want to get attacked.
They have said for years remove our sanctions, normalize relations, stop trying to overthrow us, tell your bulldog Israel to stop threatening us with war, and we can have perfectly normal relations, and we don't want a nuclear weapon. It's a much bigger headache than we want. We don't want it.
Boy, that is not the story that any American news channel tells ever.
I'm shocked. We live in the world of narratives. You know, for many years, the Iranians were asking, how do we reach the Biden White House? How do we want to open up channels? We want to negotiate. Of course, they wouldn't talk to them. It was, we know the president now, I mean, we knew then, but now it's confirmed. The president wasn't in any shape to talk to anybody. And the administration was the biggest foreign policy failure of one can imagine. But the Iranians have been saying all along, we want to negotiate. And as soon as President Trump was elected, at least I got inquiries. Do you know anyone in the White House? Do you know anyone in the president's team? How can we make contact? That's not the behavior you make if you're relentlessly trying to go to a nuclear bomb.
So what about the story that you hear endlessly that Iran is planning to nuke the United States, if that's on their agenda?
Huh?
Yeah, right.
Huh?
So you consider that like insane?
I consider that so bewildering. If a grown-up says that, we need to have a long heart-to-heart talk about a lot of facts. But that is simply the most absurd imaginable idea. Iran, by the way, is a civilization of, by usual count, 5,200 years. Persia is the usual name given
oldest
for
continuous in the world.
Iran. Yes, it's arguably the longest continuous civilization, though many jump up and say, no, we are. Maybe the Georgians say it or the Egyptians say it. So I won't get into arguments among my friends, except this is actually a great civilization that has lasted for 5,000 years. They're not going to bring it to an end by bombing the United States and having Persia or Iran disappear from the world map, literally, physically, by atom, by such an attack. So it's not.
So why are we going through all this? I mean, the full attention of huge parts of the U.S. government, billions and billions and billions and trillions over the years of American tax dollars have gone to responding to this threat. We have bases all around the region, all focused on Iran, which we maintain, including a huge one in Qatar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this effort by the United States focused on this Iranian threat that you claim doesn't exist.
Remember that Iran was first of all, Iran was a democratic country in 1953. Mm-hmm. The prime minister at the time, named Mossadegh, had this absolutely outlandish idea, which was that the oil under their ground belonged to Iranians. This was a very weird idea because the British knew it belonged to the British. The Americans expected that it belonged to the Americans in the new age. And so CIA and MI6 overthrew the Iranian democracy. Then we installed a police state known as the Shah of Iran and SAVAK, its supposed intelligence and enforcement authority from 1953 to 1978, when the Shah was dying of cancer, and he was a hated figure in Iran. Jimmy Carter was talked into taking him into into the United States, and that provoked the reaction and the taking of hostages of American hostages in Iran. And the Iranian Revolution